Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life. I'm here to help you discover how 2,000-year-old philosophical practices can solve the confidence challenges you face every single day in today's fast-paced world. You wake up each morning knowing you have tremendous potential, yet something holds you back. Maybe it's the voice in your head that questions every decision you make. Perhaps it's the way your confidence crumbles when someone criticizes your work or doubts your choices. Or it could be that overwhelming feeling when life throws unexpected challenges your way, leaving you feeling uncertain and reactive rather than calm and in control. Here's what most people don't understand about confidence. The kind of confidence that actually matters, the kind that stays strong when your boss criticizes your presentation, when your friends question your life choices, or when everything seems to go wrong at once. This confidence doesn't come from positive thinking or fake it till you make it strategies. It comes from something much deeper and more reliable. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire during some of history's most turbulent times. He faced plagues, wars, betrayals, and constant political pressure. Yet his personal writings reveal a man of unshakable inner strength. Epictetus started life as a slave, experiencing the ultimate loss of external control, yet developed teachings about confidence that have guided millions of people for centuries. Seneca advised emperors while navigating the dangerous politics of ancient Rome, maintaining his integrity and self-assurance even when facing death. These men didn't possess some special gift that you lack. They practiced specific daily habits that built what we're calling unshakable confidence. This isn't the fragile confidence that depends on everything going your way. This is the deep, reliable confidence that grows stronger through challenges rather than weaker. Today, you're going to learn 8 daily habits that these ancient philosophers used to maintain complete emotional stability and self-assurance, no matter what external circumstances they faced. These aren't complicated meditation practices or time-consuming rituals. They're simple, practical habits that you can integrate into your existing routine starting today. Each habit targets a different aspect of confidence development. Some will help you stay calm under pressure. Others will teach you how to trust your own judgment when everyone around you disagrees. You'll learn how to transform anxiety from your enemy into your ally, and how to maintain confidence while continuing to grow and learn. The beautiful thing about these ancient practices is that they were developed by people who faced challenges far more severe than anything we encounter in modern life. If these habits could help someone maintain confidence while governing an empire during wartime, they can certainly help you navigate a difficult conversation with your boss or stay composed during a job interview. Your transformation begins with understanding that true confidence isn't about never feeling uncertain or scared. It's about developing the inner strength to act wisely and stay true to yourself regardless of how you feel in any given moment. Let's discover how these 8 ancient habits can build the unshakable confidence you've been searching for. Habit 1. Build confidence by controlling what actually matters. You're sitting in your car in downtown Chicago traffic, already running 15 minutes late for the most important job interview of your career. The GPS shows red everywhere, construction has blocked 2 lanes, and your phone keeps buzzing with increasingly urgent messages from the hiring manager asking about your arrival time. Your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, and that familiar voice in your head begins its relentless commentary about how this delay will ruin everything, how they'll think you're irresponsible, and how you'll never get another opportunity like this. This moment perfectly illustrates why most people struggle with confidence in ways that leave them feeling powerless and reactive. You're experiencing what happens when your mental energy focuses on factors completely outside your influence while ignoring the areas where you actually possess tremendous power to create positive outcomes. Epictetus, the ancient Stoic philosopher who started life as a slave and understood powerlessness better than almost anyone in history, taught what he called the most fundamental principle for building unshakable confidence. He said that some things are within our control, some things are outside our control, and wisdom begins with learning to distinguish between these two categories with absolute clarity. The traffic jam that's making you late exists completely outside your control. You cannot make cars move faster through willpower or worry. You cannot change the construction schedule that created this delay. You cannot alter the fact that you're already running behind schedule. When you focus mental energy on these uncontrollable factors, you're essentially trying to control the universe through anxiety, which is both impossible and emotionally exhausting. However, within this same situation, you possess enormous control over factors that will ultimately determine your success or failure in ways that matter far more than your arrival time. You control how you communicate with the hiring manager about your delay. You can send a professional message explaining the situation and providing an updated arrival estimate. You control your emotional state when you finally arrive. You can choose to walk into that interview room composed and confident rather than frazzled and apologetic. You control how well you've prepared for the interview questions, how thoroughly you've researched the company, and how clearly you can articulate your value proposition. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire during plagues, wars, and constant political upheaval, wrote in his personal journal that we suffer more in imagination than reality. When you focus on uncontrollable factors like traffic, weather, or other people's initial impressions, you create suffering that serves no productive purpose. When you redirect that same mental energy toward controllable factors like your preparation, communication, and response quality, you build genuine confidence through actual competence and readiness. The daily habit that builds this foundational confidence involves practicing what Stoics call the dichotomy of control in real-time situations throughout your day. Every morning, spend 5 minutes identifying the day's potential challenges and sorting them into 2 categories. Write down what you cannot control about each situation, then immediately shift focus to what you can control. Consider your upcoming presentation at work. You cannot control whether your boss will be in a good mood when you present. You cannot control if the projector malfunctions or if a client calls with an emergency during your time slot. You cannot control your coworkers' opinions or their competing priorities. Worrying about these uncontrollable factors creates anxiety that undermines your confidence and preparation quality. You can control how thoroughly you prepare your content, how well you anticipate potential questions, and how clearly you organize your main points. You can control your backup plans for technical difficulties. You can control your opening remarks, your closing summary, and your ability to engage with questions confidently. When you focus energy on these controllable factors, you develop legitimate confidence based on actual readiness rather than hoped-for circumstances. This practice becomes particularly powerful when dealing with criticism or rejection, situations that typically devastate confidence in young adults. You cannot control whether someone likes your work, agrees with your decisions, or approves of your choices. You cannot control their communication style, their personal biases, or their current stress levels that might influence their feedback delivery. You can control how objectively you evaluate their criticism for useful insights. You can control your emotional response, choosing curiosity over defensiveness. You can control what you learn from the experience and how you apply those lessons to future improvement. This approach transforms criticism from confidence-destroying attacks into confidence-building information that makes you more capable and resilient. The confidence that emerges from this daily practice differs completely from superficial confidence based on external circumstances aligning perfectly. When you know that you can handle whatever happens by focusing on your response rather than trying to control outcomes, you develop what Marcus Aurelius called an inner citadel of strength that remains unshakable regardless of external turbulence. Start implementing this habit immediately by carrying a small notebook or using your phone to track daily situations where you catch yourself focusing on uncontrollable factors. The moment you notice anxiety or frustration building, ask yourself the fundamental question that Epictetus used to build his own confidence despite facing the ultimate powerlessness of slavery. Is this within my control or outside my control? If it's outside your control, consciously redirect your attention to what you can influence within the situation. This mental redirection becomes easier with practice, like strengthening a muscle through consistent exercise. Within weeks, you'll notice that your confidence remains stable even when circumstances become challenging, because you've trained yourself to invest energy only in areas where you can actually create positive change. In essence, you're learning to build confidence through competence and preparation rather than hoping for perfect conditions that rarely exist in real life. Habit 2. Stay confident when everyone doubts your decisions. You're sitting around the dinner table with your family in your childhood home, and the conversation has taken that familiar turn where everyone suddenly becomes an expert on your life choices. Your parents think you're crazy for considering a career change. Your siblings question why you're ending a relationship that looks perfect from the outside. Your uncle insists that you're making a huge mistake by turning down what he considers a perfectly good job to pursue something that aligns more closely with your values and long-term goals. The voices around the table grow louder and more insistent. They cite statistics about job market security, remind you about people they know who made similar choices and regretted them, and express genuine concern that you're throwing away stability for some unrealistic dream. Each comment feels like a small blow to your confidence, and you begin to question whether you're being naive, reckless, or simply wrong about what's best for your own life. This scenario captures one of the most challenging confidence tests that young adults face regularly. The people who care about you often become the very voices that undermine your self-assurance, not because they want to hurt you, but because their own fears, experiences, and perspectives create genuine concern about choices that differ from conventional wisdom or their own life paths. Marcus Aurelius faced this exact challenge on a much larger scale when he attempted to implement Stoic philosophical principles in governing the Roman Empire. His advisors, senators, and military commanders frequently questioned his approaches, criticized his decisions, and argued that his philosophical ideals were impractical for real-world leadership. Yet he developed a method for maintaining confidence in his judgment while remaining genuinely open to useful counsel and legitimate criticism. The key insight that Marcus Aurelius recorded in his personal meditations involves understanding the difference between decisions based on careful reasoning and virtue versus decisions that simply seek approval from others. When you make choices primarily to gain acceptance or avoid criticism, you're essentially letting other people live your life for you, which inevitably leads to regret and resentment over time. However, when you base decisions on thorough consideration of your values, honest assessment of your circumstances, and commitment to acting with integrity regardless of popular opinion, you develop what ancient Stoics called internal validation. This means your confidence stems from knowing that you've thought deeply about your choices and aligned them with your authentic values rather than external expectations. The daily habit for building this type of confidence involves developing what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, which means learning to want what virtue requires rather than what society applauds. Each evening, spend 10 minutes reviewing the day's decisions and asking yourself whether you chose based on external approval or internal conviction. When you notice that you've made choices primarily to please others or avoid criticism, use this awareness to make different choices tomorrow. Consider your career decisions as a practical example of this principle in action. You cannot control whether your family understands your career choices, whether your friends approve of your priorities, or whether society validates your particular path. These external opinions often reflect other people's fears, limitations, or circumstances that may have nothing to do with what's actually best for your unique situation and goals. You can control how thoroughly you research your options, how honestly you assess your skills and interests, and how carefully you consider the long-term implications of different choices. You can control whether you seek advice from people who have actually succeeded in areas where you want to grow, rather than just collecting opinions from anyone willing to offer them. Most importantly, you can control whether you make decisions based on your authentic values or simply choose whatever will generate the least social friction. Seneca, who advised multiple Roman emperors while maintaining his philosophical integrity, taught that truly confident people welcome criticism because they understand how to extract useful information while filtering out projections, fears, and irrelevant opinions. When someone questions your decisions, your first response should involve curiosity rather than defensiveness. Ask yourself whether their concern reveals something important that you hadn't considered, or whether it simply reflects their own anxiety about taking risks or pursuing unconventional paths. This approach transforms criticism from confidence-destroying attacks into confidence-building information that helps you make better decisions. When you know that you've genuinely considered different perspectives and still believe your choice aligns with your values and long-term goals, external disapproval becomes much less threatening to your self-assurance. The confidence that develops through this practice differs fundamentally from stubborn pride or defensive arrogance. You're not dismissing other people's input or pretending that you know everything. Instead, you're developing the ability to maintain conviction about well-reasoned decisions while remaining genuinely open to new information that might improve your thinking. Start practicing this habit by identifying one current decision where you've been overly influenced by other people's opinions rather than your own careful consideration. Write down the core values that matter most to you in this situation, then evaluate your options based on those values rather than external expectations. Notice how your confidence changes when you approach decisions from internal conviction rather than external approval. This mental shift requires consistent practice because human beings are naturally social creatures who seek belonging and acceptance. The goal isn't to become indifferent to other people's opinions, but rather to develop the discernment that allows you to benefit from useful input while maintaining confidence in decisions that align with your authentic values and long-term well-being. Over time, this practice creates a form of confidence that actually strengthens through opposition rather than weakening. When you know that your decisions come from careful thought and genuine values rather than social pressure, criticism becomes information to consider rather than attacks to defend against, creating the unshakable self-assurance that characterizes truly confident people. Habit 3. Keep your confidence during life's most stressful moments. You're standing outside the conference room in your Manhattan office building, 30 seconds before the most important presentation of your career. Your hands are trembling slightly. Your heart feels like it's beating loud enough for everyone to hear. And your mind has gone completely blank about the opening remarks you've practiced dozens of times. Through the glass door, you can see the senior executives already seated, checking their phones with expressions that suggest they have 100 more pressing matters to handle than listening to your proposal. This moment represents exactly when most people's confidence completely abandons them, leaving them feeling exposed, vulnerable, and uncertain about their ability to perform when it matters most. The physiological stress response that evolved to help our ancestors survive physical dangers now works against us in professional and social situations, creating internal chaos precisely when we need mental clarity and composed confidence. Marcus Aurelius understood this challenge intimately because ruling the Roman Empire meant making life and death decisions while under enormous pressure from political enemies, military threats, and public scrutiny. His personal writings reveal the mental techniques he used to maintain confident decision-making ability even when facing circumstances that would overwhelm most people's emotional capacity. The fundamental insight that Marcus Aurelius developed involves recognizing that stress and pressure are actually neutral experiences that become positive or negative based entirely on how we interpret and respond to them. When you tell yourself that nervousness means you're unprepared or inadequate, those physical sensations become evidence of impending failure. When you reframe those same sensations as signs that you care deeply about the outcome and that your body is preparing you to perform at your highest level, the experience transforms into confidence-building energy. Consider what's actually happening in your body during stressful moments. Your heart rate increases to deliver more oxygen to your brain and muscles. Your breathing becomes deeper to enhance mental alertness. Your focus narrows to eliminate distractions that might interfere with peak performance. These physiological changes represent your body's attempt to help you succeed, not evidence that you're failing or unprepared. The ancient Stoics taught a daily practice called prosoke, which means paying careful attention to your thoughts and reactions in real time. This habit involves noticing the exact moment when stress begins to undermine your confidence, then consciously choosing a different interpretation of what's happening. Instead of thinking, "I'm so nervous, I'm going to mess this up," you practice thinking, "My body is getting ready to help me perform at my best." This mental reframing isn't positive thinking or denial of reality. You're acknowledging the pressure while choosing an interpretation that supports confident action rather than anxious paralysis. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we have the power to revoke our consent to be disturbed by external circumstances, which means you can experience stress without allowing it to destroy your self-assurance. The daily implementation of this habit begins with identifying your personal early warning signals that indicate rising stress levels. Some people notice tension in their shoulders or jaw. Others experience changes in breathing patterns or stomach sensations. Once you recognize these signals, you can intervene before stress overwhelms your confidence completely. When you notice stress building, immediately ask yourself the question that Marcus Aurelius used during the most challenging moments of his reign. What would virtue do in this situation? This question redirects your focus from your internal anxiety to the external action that integrity and excellence require, regardless of how you feel in the moment. Virtue doesn't wait for perfect emotional conditions before taking the right action. Courage means acting despite fear, not acting without fear. Wisdom means making good decisions under pressure, not avoiding difficult situations. When you anchor your confidence in virtue rather than emotional comfort, stress becomes irrelevant to your ability to perform excellently. The practical application involves developing specific phrases or questions that help you reframe stressful moments in real time. When facing a difficult conversation, remind yourself that discomfort often signals growth and learning opportunities. When preparing for a challenging presentation, recognize that nervousness indicates how much you care about delivering value to your audience. When dealing with conflict or criticism, understand that these situations test and strengthen your character rather than threaten your worth. Seneca, who navigated the dangerous politics of ancient Rome while maintaining his philosophical principles, taught that we can train ourselves to find opportunity within every challenging circumstance. This doesn't mean pretending that difficult situations are easy or pleasant, but rather developing the mental flexibility to discover how pressure can actually enhance your performance when you approach it correctly. Building this habit requires consistent practice during smaller stressful moments throughout your daily routine. When you're running late for an appointment, practice staying calm and focused rather than letting time pressure create internal chaos. When technology malfunctions during an important task, use the situation to practice maintaining the confident problem-solving ability rather than frustrated panic. Each time you successfully maintain confidence during stress, you build evidence that you can handle pressure without losing your ability to think clearly and act effectively. This creates a positive feedback loop where challenging situations become opportunities to prove your resilience rather than tests that might reveal your inadequacy. Over time, this practice fundamentally changes your relationship with stress and pressure. Instead of viewing challenging moments as threats to your confidence, you begin to see them as chances to demonstrate and strengthen your ability to perform excellently regardless of external circumstances. Ultimately, this transforms you into someone who actually becomes more confident and capable when the stakes are highest, rather than someone whose confidence crumbles when it matters most. Habit 4. Boost your confidence through daily reading habits. You're scrolling through social media on your phone while riding the subway to work in New York City, watching an endless stream of people who seem to have their lives completely figured out. Everyone appears more successful, more confident, and more certain about their direction than you feel about your own path. The comparison creates that familiar sinking feeling where you question whether you have what it takes to succeed in such a competitive environment, surrounded by people who seem naturally gifted with knowledge and insights that you lack. This modern scenario perfectly illustrates a confidence problem that has existed for thousands of years. Yet most people remain completely unaware of the simple solution that ancient philosophers discovered and used to build extraordinary self-assurance. The feeling of intellectual inadequacy, of being outmatched by others who seem to possess superior wisdom or understanding, represents one of the most common sources of diminished confidence in young adults navigating complex career and life decisions. Here's what those apparently confident people around you understand that creates such a dramatic difference in their self-assurance. They've discovered what Seneca called the greatest superpower available to any human being, regardless of their background, education, or natural abilities. This superpower allows you to have conversations with the smartest, wisest, and most accomplished people who have ever lived, learning directly from their experiences, insights, and hard-won wisdom without having to live through every possible mistake or challenge personally. The ancient Stoic philosopher Zeno discovered this principle when he visited the oracle at Delphi as a young man seeking guidance about his future. The oracle gave him a prophecy that seemed mysterious at first. She told him that he would become wise when he began having conversations with the dead. For years, Zeno couldn't understand what this meant until he realized that the oracle was talking about reading books written by brilliant people from previous generations. Through reading, you gain access to thousands of years of human experience, wisdom, and problem-solving approaches that would be impossible to acquire through personal experience alone. When you read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, you're essentially receiving personal coaching from someone who successfully managed the pressures of ruling the world's largest empire while maintaining his philosophical principles. When you study the letters of Seneca, you're learning from someone who navigated complex political situations, built substantial wealth, and maintained his integrity under extreme pressure. This accumulated wisdom naturally builds confidence because it expands your mental toolkit for handling any situation you might encounter. Instead of approaching challenges with only your limited personal experience, you can draw upon the tested strategies and insights of people who have faced similar difficulties and discovered effective solutions. This knowledge creates a sense of preparedness and capability that translates directly into self-assurance. The daily habit that transforms reading from passive entertainment into active confidence building involves approaching books as mentorship sessions rather than information consumption. Each morning, dedicate 30 minutes to reading material specifically chosen to address areas where you want to develop greater confidence and competence. This might include biographies of people who have succeeded in your field, philosophical works that help you think more clearly about important decisions, or practical guides that teach skills relevant to your goals. The key difference between confidence-building reading and casual reading lies in how actively you engage with the material. Instead of simply absorbing information, you practice what Seneca called extracting the marrow from each book. This means identifying specific insights that apply to your current challenges and writing down concrete ways to implement what you've learned in your daily life. Consider how this approach works when facing career uncertainty, one of the most common confidence challenges for young adults. Rather than relying solely on advice from friends or family members whose experience might be limited to their particular circumstances, you can study how successful people from various fields have navigated career transitions, built expertise, and created opportunities throughout history. When you read about how someone like Benjamin Franklin developed his skills through deliberate practice and strategic networking, or how Maya Angelou overcame adversity to build a remarkable career, you're not just learning facts about their lives. You're discovering proven strategies for building confidence through competence, creating value for others, and maintaining resilience during difficult periods. The confidence that emerges from this daily practice differs fundamentally from superficial confidence based on positive affirmations or motivational content. This confidence stems from genuine knowledge and understanding that you've acquired through systematic learning from people who have actually achieved what you want to accomplish. When you know that you've studied how successful people have handled situations similar to what you're facing, you approach challenges with the calm assurance that comes from having a well-stocked mental toolkit. Building this habit requires being strategic about your reading choices rather than randomly selecting whatever seems interesting. Focus on books that address your specific confidence gaps. If public speaking makes you nervous, read biographies of great speakers and practical guides to communication. If financial decisions feel overwhelming, study how wealthy people think about money and risk management. If relationships challenge you, explore what psychologists and philosophers have learned about human connection and emotional intelligence. The transformation that occurs through consistent confidence-building reading extends beyond just acquiring information. You begin to think differently about problems and opportunities because you've absorbed the thought patterns and decision-making approaches of people who have succeeded in areas where you want to grow. This mental expansion naturally increases your self-assurance because you approach situations with greater wisdom and perspective than your personal experience alone could provide. In essence, daily reading creates what ancient Stoics called a council of advisors that you can consult whenever you face difficult decisions or challenging circumstances. Instead of feeling isolated with your uncertainties, you have access to the collective wisdom of humanity's greatest thinkers and achievers, building the deep, knowledge-based confidence that remains unshakable regardless of external circumstances. Habit 5. Maintain confidence while staying open to growth. You're sitting in your manager's office in downtown Los Angeles, receiving feedback on a project that you thought went exceptionally well. As she speaks, pointing out areas for improvement and suggesting different approaches you could have taken, you feel your confidence beginning to crumble. Each piece of constructive criticism feels like evidence that you're not as competent as you believed, and you find yourself caught between two equally uncomfortable responses. Either you become defensive, protecting your ego by dismissing her feedback as unfair or uninformed, or you spiral into self-doubt, questioning whether you have any idea what you're doing professionally. This internal conflict represents one of the most sophisticated confidence challenges that thoughtful people face throughout their careers and personal development. How do you maintain strong self-assurance while remaining genuinely open to learning, growth, and improvement? Most people assume these goals are contradictory, believing that confidence requires certainty about your abilities while growth requires acknowledging your limitations and mistakes. The ancient Stoic philosophers discovered that this apparent contradiction dissolves completely when you understand what genuine confidence actually means versus the brittle, defensive confidence that most people mistake for strength. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful person in the ancient world, filled his personal journal with observations about his own mistakes, areas for improvement, and lessons he needed to learn. His confidence didn't come from believing he was perfect, but from knowing that he could handle whatever challenges arose through continuous learning and adaptation. True confidence, according to Stoic philosophy, stems from trust in your ability to learn, grow, and respond effectively to new situations rather than from believing you already possess all necessary knowledge and skills. When you base your self-assurance on your capacity for growth rather than your current level of competence, feedback and criticism become fuel for confidence rather than threats to it. This distinction transforms how you experience learning opportunities throughout your life. Instead of viewing gaps in your knowledge or skills as embarrassing revelations of inadequacy, you begin to see them as exciting opportunities to become more capable and effective. The person who discovers they need to improve their communication skills isn't lacking confidence, but rather demonstrating the confidence to acknowledge reality and take action to enhance their abilities. Epictetus, who started life as a slave and therefore understood the relationship between humility and strength better than almost anyone, taught that the beginning of wisdom involves recognizing how much you don't know. This recognition doesn't undermine confidence, but rather creates the foundation for genuine learning and growth. When you pretend to know more than you actually do, you cut yourself off from opportunities to acquire real knowledge and competence. The daily habit that builds this sophisticated form of confidence involves practicing what Stoics called the discipline of learning. Each evening, spend 10 minutes reflecting on what you learned that day, what mistakes you made, and what areas you want to improve tomorrow. Instead of viewing this reflection as self-criticism, Approach it as evidence of your commitment to excellence and continuous development. Consider how this mindset transforms your approach to professional challenges and feedback. When your supervisor suggests improvements to your work, your first response becomes curiosity rather than defensiveness. You ask clarifying questions to understand exactly what could be enhanced and why those changes would create better outcomes. This response demonstrates confidence in your ability to learn and improve rather than fragile ego that requires protection from honest assessment. The confidence that emerges from this approach actually grows stronger through encounters with your limitations and mistakes rather than weaker. Each time you successfully learn from feedback, adapt to new requirements, or improve your skills based on honest self-assessment, you build evidence that you can handle whatever challenges life presents through growth and adaptation. This creates what psychologists call a growth mindset, but the Stoic version goes deeper than simply believing you can improve. Stoic confidence combines this openness to learning with unshakable trust in your fundamental capacity to handle difficulties through virtue and wisdom. You're not confident because you're perfect, but because you know you can become whatever you need to become through patient effort and honest self-examination. Building this habit requires distinguishing between healthy self-respect and defensive ego in your daily interactions. Healthy confidence allows you to say, "I don't know," when you lack information, ask questions when you need clarification, and admit mistakes when you've made errors. Defensive ego pretends to know everything, avoids questions that might reveal ignorance, and makes excuses rather than acknowledging areas for improvement. The practical implementation involves actively seeking feedback from people whose judgment you respect, approaching criticism as valuable information rather than personal attacks, and viewing challenges as opportunities to test and strengthen your abilities. When someone points out a weakness in your approach, your internal response shifts from "they're attacking me" to "they're helping me identify where I can grow." This transformation requires patience because society often confuses confidence with arrogance or defensive behavior. True confidence appears quieter and more humble than fake confidence, but it's actually much stronger because it's based on genuine competence and the knowledge that you can continue developing throughout your life. Ultimately, this habit creates a form of confidence that becomes more unshakable over time rather than more fragile. When you know that you can learn whatever you need to learn and grow in whatever ways life requires, external circumstances lose their power to undermine your self-assurance because your confidence is anchored in your capacity for adaptation and improvement rather than in maintaining an image of perfection. Habit 6. Build long-term confidence by choosing growth over quick wins. You're standing at your kitchen counter in your Chicago apartment, staring at 2 job offers that represent completely different paths for your future. The first offer provides immediate gratification in every way that society teaches you to value. The salary is significantly higher than what you're making now. The title sounds impressive when you tell people at parties, and you could start enjoying a more comfortable lifestyle within months. The second offer pays less initially, but it would place you in an environment where you'd learn from industry leaders, develop skills that compound over time, and build the kind of expertise that creates lasting career success. This moment perfectly captures one of the most critical confidence-building decisions that young adults face repeatedly throughout their 20s and 30s. In a culture that celebrates instant results and immediate rewards, choosing long-term growth over short-term gains requires a sophisticated understanding of how real confidence develops over time versus how it appears to develop through quick fixes and external validation. Most people make these decisions based on what will feel good immediately or what will impress others in the short term, not realizing that this approach systematically undermines the deep, lasting confidence that comes from building genuine competence and character over years of patient investment in growth. The immediate gratification choice often leads to what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, where each temporary boost to your confidence requires increasingly larger external achievements to maintain the same level of self-assurance. Seneca, who accumulated substantial wealth while serving as advisor to Roman emperors, understood this principle intimately because he witnessed how people who built their confidence on external achievements often lost everything when circumstances changed. His letters reveal the wisdom he developed about investing time and energy in ways that create compound returns rather than immediate pleasures that fade quickly and leave you no stronger than before. The fundamental insight that ancient Stoics discovered involves recognizing that time represents your most valuable and irreplaceable resource. Unlike money, which you can earn again after losing it, or relationships, which you can rebuild after damaging them, time moves in only one direction, and every moment you spend on immediate gratification is a moment you cannot invest in long-term development that would create lasting confidence and capability. This doesn't mean avoiding all immediate pleasures or living like a monk who never enjoys life. Instead, it means developing the wisdom to distinguish between choices that provide temporary satisfaction while moving you away from your long-term goals versus choices that might require short-term sacrifice but build the foundation for sustained success and genuine self-assurance. The daily habit that builds this long-term thinking involves what Marcus Aurelius practiced throughout his reign as emperor. Each morning, he would consider his decisions not just in terms of immediate consequences, but in terms of how they would affect his character, capabilities, and circumstances years into the future. This practice, which he called taking the view from above, allows you to see beyond immediate emotions and social pressures to make choices that serve your authentic long-term interests. Consider how this approach transforms your decision-making around skill development and learning opportunities. The quick-win mentality pushes you toward courses, workshops, or experiences that promise immediate results with minimal effort. You might choose a weekend seminar that claims to teach advanced networking skills over spending months developing genuine expertise in your field through careful study and practice. However, when you think long-term, you realize that building real competence in any area requires sustained effort over time, and that competence creates the kind of unshakable confidence that doesn't depend on external circumstances or other people's opinions. The person who spends a year systematically developing their communication skills through daily practice, feedback, and improvement develops deeper confidence than someone who attends motivational seminars that provide temporary inspiration without building lasting capability. This principle applies equally to financial decisions, relationship choices, and career planning. The confident person chooses to live below their means and invest in long-term financial security rather than spending everything they earn on lifestyle upgrades that impress others but leave them financially vulnerable. They invest time in building deep, meaningful relationships rather than collecting shallow social connections that provide temporary validation but no real support during difficult times. Building this habit requires developing what Seneca called the discipline of desire, which means training yourself to want things that actually serve your long-term well-being rather than things that simply feel good in the moment. This involves regularly asking yourself whether your current choices are building the person you want to become or simply maintaining the comfort level you currently enjoy. The practical implementation begins with identifying areas where you've been choosing short-term comfort over long-term growth, then gradually shifting your decision-making patterns toward choices that might feel uncomfortable initially but build lasting strength and capability. When faced with any significant decision, Ask yourself how you'll feel about this choice in 5 years and whether it moves you closer to or further from the person you want to become. The confidence that emerges from this patient, long-term approach differs completely from confidence based on external achievements or social validation. When you know that your daily choices are building genuine competence, strong relationships, and unshakable character, you develop what ancient Stoics called an inner fortress that remains stable regardless of external circumstances or other people's opinions. Consequently, this habit creates a positive feedback loop where each choice to prioritize growth over quick gratification builds evidence that you can be trusted to make decisions that serve your authentic interests rather than just your immediate impulses. Over time, this self-trust becomes one of the most reliable sources of confidence available to any person. Habit 7. Transform anxiety into unshakable confidence. You're lying awake at 3 in the morning in your Los Angeles apartment, staring at the ceiling while your mind races through an endless loop of what-if scenarios about tomorrow's crucial client presentation. Your stomach feels tight, your chest feels heavy, and every time you start to drift towards sleep, another wave of anxious thoughts jolts you back to full alertness. You're worried about forgetting important points, stumbling over your words, or facing questions you can't answer confidently. The anxiety feels like evidence that you're not ready, not capable, and definitely not the kind of person who should be trusted with such an important responsibility. This familiar middle-of-the-night anxiety spiral represents one of the most misunderstood aspects of confidence development that affects millions of young adults who mistake their worry for weakness rather than recognizing it as a potential source of tremendous strength. Most people treat anxiety as the enemy of confidence, believing that truly confident people never feel nervous, worried, or uncertain about important outcomes. This misconception creates a destructive cycle where normal human emotions become additional sources of self-doubt rather than information that can actually enhance your performance and self-assurance. The ancient Stoic philosophers, who faced challenges far more severe than modern workplace pressures or social anxieties, developed a radically different understanding of the relationship between worry and confidence that transforms anxiety from your greatest obstacle into your most powerful ally. Marcus Aurelius, while governing an empire during plagues and wars, wrote extensively about managing anxious thoughts and discovered that the key to confidence lies not in eliminating anxiety, but in changing how you interpret and respond to these natural human emotions. Here's the fundamental insight that changes everything about how you experience anxiety and confidence. Worry often indicates that you care deeply about achieving excellent outcomes and that your mind is actively working to identify potential problems before they occur. This mental process, when properly directed, represents one of your most valuable capabilities for achieving success and building genuine confidence through thorough preparation and strategic thinking. The difference between anxiety that destroys confidence and anxiety that builds confidence lies entirely in how you interpret these feelings and what actions you take in response to them. When you view anxious thoughts as evidence of your inadequacy or as signs that you're not ready for challenges, those thoughts become self-fulfilling prophecies that undermine your performance and self-assurance. However, when you recognize anxiety as your mind's way of highlighting areas that deserve extra attention and preparation, those same thoughts become a roadmap for building the competence that creates lasting confidence. Seneca, who navigated the dangerous political environment of ancient Rome while maintaining his philosophical principles, taught a daily practice that transforms anxious energy into confident action. He called this process turning obstacles into opportunities, which means using worry as motivation for more thorough preparation rather than allowing it to become a source of paralysis or self-doubt. The practical implementation begins with changing your internal dialogue when anxiety arises. Instead of thinking, "I'm so nervous about this presentation. I must not be ready," practice thinking, "My mind is identifying areas where extra preparation would be valuable." This reframe immediately shifts your focus from self-criticism to productive action, using anxious energy as fuel for building genuine readiness rather than wasting it on unproductive worry. Consider how this transformation works when facing social situations that typically trigger confidence-undermining anxiety. Instead of interpreting nervous feelings before a networking event as evidence that you don't belong or aren't interesting enough, recognize those feelings as signs that you want to make meaningful connections and that spending time preparing conversation topics or researching attendees would increase your chances of success. The daily habit involves developing what ancient Stoics called the discipline of perception, which means consciously choosing how you interpret the physical sensations and mental experiences that accompany challenging situations. Each time you notice anxiety beginning to build, immediately ask yourself what specific actions you could take to address the underlying concerns that your mind has identified. This approach creates what psychologists now call productive anxiety, where worried thoughts become the starting point for concrete preparation steps rather than endless mental loops that exhaust your energy without improving your actual readiness. When you're worried about a job interview, instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you use that energy to research the company more thoroughly, practice answering difficult questions, or prepare thoughtful questions that demonstrate your genuine interest. The confidence that develops through this practice differs fundamentally from false confidence based on pretending you never feel nervous or uncertain. This confidence comes from knowing that you can transform any anxious thought into productive action that genuinely improves your preparation and capabilities. When you've trained yourself to use worry as information rather than intimidation, you actually become more confident in challenging situations because you trust your ability to identify and address potential problems before they become actual obstacles. Building this habit requires patience and consistent practice because society teaches us to view anxiety as a weakness rather than information. Start by tracking situations where anxiety arises and experimenting with asking, "What is this feeling trying to tell me about how I can better prepare?" rather than, "Why am I so nervous about this?" Over time, this practice creates a remarkable transformation where anxiety becomes a confidence-building signal rather than a confidence-destroying experience, allowing you to approach challenges with the calm assurance that comes from knowing you can always find ways to improve your readiness and performance. Habit 8. Unlock limitless confidence by eliminating your ego. You're sitting in a crowded coffee shop in downtown Manhattan, overhearing a conversation between two colleagues at the next table who are discussing a project that went better than expected. As they talk, you realize they're describing the exact same type of initiative that you attempted 6 months ago, except their version succeeded while yours failed spectacularly. Your immediate internal response reveals everything about whether your confidence is built on a solid foundation or constructed from the fragile materials of ego and self-image protection. If your first thought involves making mental excuses about why their situation was easier, why they had advantages you didn't have, or why their success doesn't really count for various reasons, you're experiencing what ancient philosophers identified as the most dangerous enemy of genuine confidence. Your ego is working overtime to protect an image of yourself that requires constant defense against any evidence that might challenge your sense of superiority or specialness. However, if your response involves genuine curiosity about what they did differently, excitement about learning from their approach, and honest reflection about what you could have done better in your own attempt, you're demonstrating the kind of confidence that actually grows stronger through encounters with other people's successes and your own failures. This fundamental difference represents the distinction between ego-based confidence, which remains forever fragile and defensive, and authentic confidence, which becomes more unshakable through every challenge, setback, and learning opportunity you encounter throughout your life. Seneca, who counseled Roman emperors while maintaining his philosophical integrity under extreme political pressure, wrote extensively about this paradox. He observed that people who seem most confident on the surface often possess the most fragile sense of self-worth, requiring constant validation and protection from any information that might threaten their carefully constructed self-image. Meanwhile, people who appear more humble and open to learning actually possess much deeper confidence because their self-assurance doesn't depend on being better than others or never making mistakes. The ego creates what psychologists now call defensive confidence, where your sense of self-worth depends on maintaining superiority over others, avoiding situations where you might fail or look foolish, and constantly collecting evidence that you're special, talented, or deserving of admiration. This approach to confidence requires enormous mental energy because you must constantly monitor threats to your image and develop elaborate justifications for any outcomes that don't align with your preferred self-perception. Authentic confidence, which ancient Stoics called true strength, operates from an entirely different foundation. Your self-assurance comes from knowing that you can learn whatever you need to learn, adapt to whatever challenges arise, and maintain your integrity regardless of external circumstances or other people's opinions. This confidence actually increases when you encounter people who are more skilled, successful, or knowledgeable than you because each encounter represents an opportunity to learn and grow rather than a threat to your sense of worth. The daily habit that builds this ego-free confidence involves practicing what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, which means training yourself to want what virtue and wisdom require rather than what your ego demands. Each time you notice defensive thoughts arising when someone criticizes your work, achieves something you haven't accomplished, or demonstrates superior knowledge or skill, use that moment as an opportunity to practice genuine humility and curiosity instead of defensive reactions. This practice begins with recognizing the difference between healthy self-respect and ego-driven defensiveness in your daily interactions. Healthy confidence allows you to acknowledge when someone else has a better idea, to admit when you've made a mistake, and to ask questions when you don't understand something. Ego-driven defensiveness compels you to argue even when you're wrong, to minimize other people's successes, and to pretend you know more than you actually do. Consider how this transformation affects your professional relationships and career development. When your colleague receives a promotion that you wanted, your ego might generate thoughts about favoritism, office politics, or unfair advantages that explain why you didn't succeed. These thoughts protect your self-image but prevent you from learning what you could do differently to improve your own prospects for advancement. An ego-free response involves genuinely congratulating your colleague and asking what strategies or skills contributed to their success. This approach provides valuable information for your own development while building stronger professional relationships based on mutual respect rather than competitive resentment. Building this habit requires patience because society often confuses confidence with arrogance or defensive behavior. True confidence appears quieter and more humble than ego-driven confidence, but it's actually much stronger because it's based on genuine competence and character rather than image management and social positioning. The practical implementation involves actively seeking situations where you can practice intellectual humility, and genuine curiosity about other people's knowledge and experiences. When someone disagrees with your opinion, instead of immediately defending your position, ask questions to understand their perspective more deeply. When you encounter someone who excels in an area where you struggle, approach them as a potential teacher rather than a threat to your self-esteem. Consequently, this practice creates what Marcus Aurelius called an inner fortress of strength that becomes more solid through every encounter with criticism, failure, or other people's superior abilities. When your confidence doesn't depend on being better than others or never making mistakes, you become truly unshakable because nothing external can threaten the foundation of your self-assurance. Your daily confidence-building practice starts now. You now possess 8 powerful habits that can transform your relationship with confidence completely, moving you from the exhausting cycle of external validation to the unshakable inner strength that ancient Stoic philosophers used to navigate the most challenging circumstances imaginable. These aren't just interesting ideas to think about occasionally, but practical daily tools that build genuine confidence through consistent application and real-world testing. Think about how different your life becomes when you master the foundational habit of focusing only on what you can control. Instead of wasting energy on other people's opinions, economic conditions, or past mistakes, you direct all your mental power toward areas where you can actually create positive change. This single shift eliminates the majority of anxiety and self-doubt that undermines most people's confidence on a daily basis. Imagine approaching every difficult conversation, challenging presentation, or important decision with the calm assurance that comes from trusting your own judgment while remaining genuinely open to learning and growth. When you've trained yourself to use anxiety as preparation fuel rather than allowing it to become paralysis, and when you've eliminated the ego that requires constant protection and validation, you develop the kind of confidence that actually strengthens through adversity rather than crumbling when circumstances become difficult. The transformation happens through consistency rather than perfection. Choose 1 or 2 habits that address your biggest confidence challenges and practice them daily for the next 2 weeks. Maybe you start each morning by identifying what you can and cannot control about the day ahead. Then spend 10 minutes reading material that builds your knowledge and wisdom. Perhaps you practice reframing anxious thoughts as preparation opportunities and catch yourself when ego starts generating defensive reactions to criticism or other people's success. Remember that Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus developed these practices while facing challenges far more severe than modern workplace stress or social media pressure. If these habits could help someone maintain confidence while governing an empire during wartime, navigating dangerous political environments, or overcoming slavery, they can certainly help you build unshakable self-assurance in your daily life. The ancient Stoics understood that confidence isn't about never feeling uncertain or afraid, but about developing the inner strength to act wisely and maintain your integrity regardless of external circumstances or internal emotions. When you've built confidence on this foundation, nothing can truly shake your sense of self-worth because it doesn't depend on perfect conditions or other people's approval. Your journey toward unshakable confidence begins today with the decision to practice these ancient habits in your modern life. Start small, be patient with yourself, and trust that consistent daily application will create the transformation you're seeking. If this video has helped you understand how to build genuine confidence through ancient wisdom, please subscribe to Stoic Vivu for more practical philosophy that addresses the real challenges you face in contemporary life. Hit the like button if you're ready to start implementing these habits. and share this content with anyone who could benefit from learning how ancient Stoic practices create unshakable confidence in our modern world. Your support helps us continue bringing you the timeless wisdom that transforms lives through daily practice and authentic personal development.